Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Building on the wonderful presentations this morning, we picked up many issues around the challenges of implementation and adoption of innovation within the NHS, particularly in the digital health and mental health field. So I'm just going to give you a whistle-stop tour, building on a number of those issues that were mentioned this morning. So I work for Oxford Academic Health Science Network. There are 15 AHSNs in the country. We're largely partnership organisations, and we work with academics, with the NHS and with industry, be it spin-outs and start-ups and small to medium-sized enterprises through to large companies. In the Oxford region, that covers a population of 3 million, and we have over 700 life science companies there, 9 universities and 3 NHS trusts that are global digital exemplar sites. We're also a collaborative partner, as you'll have seen earlier, in the MindTech MIC, and I'm really excited about the opportunities that offers us in order to work very closely with your research agenda and then help implement some of the solutions. So I haven't got time to go into our programme, it's colossal. It's a large programme, but we have 7 programmes and themes that we focus on. The key ones that I think are relevant here are we have a strong clinical innovation adoption programme that actually takes projects and innovations that are ready for market and takes them into the NHS and does a lot of those challenging projects around finding out how best to implement that solution into the NHS. We've got a very strong patient safety collaborative as well, and I work in the strategic and industry partnerships team, where we tend to work with the early stage companies and really help try and shape what they are developing so that it can be commercialised and taken through to be adopted in the health and social care sector. But we also have a very strong informatics team, and we have an IG framework which across the region, which helps to address a lot of the data sharing agreements and some of the data issues that were mentioned earlier. And we have a very strong patient and public involvement, engagement and experience team. So we do a lot of co-creation with patients and a lot of leading together projects. So this is just to mention the fact that there's a clearly outlined 10-step process for the clinical innovation adoption projects. So the team take the innovation through a very controlled process and project manage the adoption through into the NHS. That's not to say it's not challenging, it really is, and lots of the issues that were raised earlier this morning are very, very live issues. We also have a strong mental health programme, and within our AHSM, we have 3 nationally recognised mental health networks in dementia, in early intervention in psychosis, and anxiety and depression. We obviously also have the new BRC, and we have lots of strengths around mental health. So it's a really good fit with the MindTech MIC. So moving on to digital health, we're a really strong digital health cluster within the Oxford region, and particularly around Oxford and Oxfordshire. So last year we did an audit, the report on the left, of the sort of digital health assets and strengths within the region, and it's really worth a read if you're interested. And then more recently we've led the digital stream of something called a science and innovation audit, which really looks at the strength and depth of the skills and the opportunities within the region. And then just this week we have published this digital health roadmap, which is a guide for innovators, particularly aimed at the SMEs, but it's useful really for anyone looking to spin out their academic work. And it outlines all the challenges that you're going to face in trying to commercialise a product. So we work very collaboratively, and we would look to support innovators along this roadmap. So the roadmap is a 7-step process from concept or idea through to commercialisation. And it's supported by these other topics. As I said, in more detail, we look at the challenge of interoperability, of information governance, of the regulatory framework, of whether the product needs CE marking, clinical testing in a real-world environment, and developing a model that allows the innovation to be commercialised, whether that's for profit or not for profit. The digital health ecosystem is very challenging. This report was published in September, and it's very heartening to see that there's now a significant number of strong evidence-based trials and RCTs. So of the 571 studies published since 2007, over a quarter of them were published in 2017. So the momentum is really growing, and obviously many of you in the room are involved in all this excellent research. And so there's a really strong and growing body of evidence. But the challenge is still what to do with that evidence once you've proved the concept and you know that the product is safe, etc. So there's some challenges really around an appropriate and proportionate study or trial that deals with the challenges of digital health in terms of the speed of development of the technology, the speed that it needs to get to the end user, and some of the costs involved with running an RCT, and some of those just aren't realistic for SMEs. So there's work ongoing looking at alternative mechanisms for doing this. So the challenges within the field, this is just some of them, but particularly on the left-hand side, the app development, I think, really is more aimed at the SMEs, which is really, and it was really heartening this morning, Chris's opening remark really about the fact that everything you're doing is needs-led, and I think that's absolutely excellent, and that's often a real problem. People come to us, particularly SMEs, and they've developed the most amazing solutions, but there isn't actually a need for it. So, that's a really, really key point. And also really defining what that value proposition is. What value is it going to add, either in terms of improved clinical outcomes, improved productivity, or improved service change or service delivery. So those are the sorts of challenges that developers will find. And the biggest challenge is demonstrating its value, the value of what they've developed to the healthcare system and the health economic benefit, because we all know the challenges that the NHS faces. And, if an innovation or a drug or whatever it is doesn't deliver improved productivity or better outcomes for patients, and if it's not affordable, then however good it is, it won't be bought by the system. And then on the right-hand side, the challenges of adoption and implementation. And that's really about once you've got your product out there and into the NHS, so the Clinical Innovation Adoption team at the HSN are looking at it, they've got to align the financial incentives in the system, and they are really challenging within the NHS. Understanding who's really going to pay for your product, understanding where it fits within the clinical pathway, and making sure that it is possible to adapt that clinical pathway. But equally, we don't want to discourage disruptive innovation, and a lot of digital innovation is disruptive, but it's about managing that and how you can then implement it into the system. And, there's lots of other issues. I could talk for a long time, but I better not. So we've worked closely with NICE when we were developing this roadmap, and they have completed, I don't know if you saw them, but they completed 5 health app briefings. One of them was around Sleepio, and we're working with the Sleepio team, because one of the challenges was, despite all the RCT evidence, there was no health economic evaluation evidence, and so that's the next step in the journey. So we help to smooth this runway to adoption. So what we can do is support with the evaluation of business propositions, with the clinical pathway mapping to be really clear where the product fits within the pathway or what needs to be redesigned within the pathway before it's introduced, developing those evaluation studies so that we can prove and develop some really strong health economic evidence to support the payers, the argument for the payers to purchase the product, and generation of that real-world evidence. So how does it really work in the real world out there with real people and real patients? And I think a real key is to get commissioners involved in all of this as early as possible, so that they understand what's coming through and we can create the value proposition to really support them. Thank you.